All right. Oh, is that him? 9-2? That might be him. Bernie, are you on now? Oh.
One quick question. Do we have, I noticed that on the, we have Commissioner Shirlene and Commissioner Peterson there listed. Are they
Peterson's on the committee.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
All right. While hearing that, Mayor.
So, excuse me, this is Commissioner Shirling. John, is that a problem if I'm listening in or
No,
not?
Good afternoon.
it's fine. You can listen in, but you should. We should not. You won't want to participate in the discussion, so we don't run into an issue with the diversion board meeting because I think we are counting 7 board members right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I was just observing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Marion, outreach, we decided that if you're not on the committee, apparently Shelley and Roger had a discussion that we're supposed to be just observers. So that will be something we'll probably discuss at the board meeting.
Okay, Bernie, are you on now?
I'm on my phone. I'm having computer problems. I've had them all day, so my apologies. So we'll call the April 21st Diversion Authority Finance Committee together. The first order of business is a roll call. Don, would you do that?
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Dr. Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
I'm here.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin.
Here, on the phone.
Ms. Johnson. Mr. Montplaisir.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Garrick. Ms. McCall. A quorum is present.
Thank you, Don. The next order of business is to approve the minutes of the March 24th meeting.
Steen moves to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Is there a second, please?
Hendrickson will second.
Thank you. We have a second. It's been moved and second to approve the March 24th meetings as distributed. Any discussion? Hearing none.
Mr.
Don,
Chairman,
please
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
sorry, you can't see our hands up right now. I forgot you were on the phone. I just want to make a correction of the minutes.
Please, Mayor Mahoney.
I think we have to be a little careful on the minutes. I don't quite know, Don, maybe how we might phrase this, but it says the local people will remember that this situation was not handled well. I would rather have that phrase, I guess we would just be concerned about the concerns about the local community used as consultants. The not handled well, I would object to. So I know it's difficult for you to do that, but it might be a better phrase that we need to be aware of use of local consultants rather than not handled well, if you don't mind.
I will work with John on different verbiage on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Mahoney, and thank you, Don, for working with Joel on that. We have a motion on the table. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Excuse me. Don, would you please call the roll? My apologies.
Mayor Dardis.
Mayor Dardis, you can actually use just a voice vote on this.
All right.
It's easier.
Don, please call the roll. Aye.
I'm sorry, Mayor Dardis, you want a roll call?
Yes, please.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is approve the order of the agenda. It's in your packet and has been distributed. Are there any additions?
So moved. Mahoney.
Thank you. Is
Steen,
there a second,
second.
please? Been
Steen,
moved and seconded. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. The next order of business is the approval of the bills. Mr. Costin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The total bills on the list for the month of April total $1,862,987.37. It looks to be pretty typical bills. Cash Joint Water District's the largest. Stakeholder reimbursements from Clay County and the City of Fargo, and some other miscellaneous bills. So that'd be all.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Is there any questions for Mr. Costin with regard to the bills?
Mahoney, move to approve.
Jacobson, second.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the bills as presented by Mr. Costin. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson is on the line. She apparently can't hear us. Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. The next order of business is item number 5 is the financial report. Again, Mr. Costin, please.
Yeah, thanks again. Page 30 of the financial packet, cumulative spend for 2021, $14,744,770, and a cumulative project life-to-date total of $660,752,111. You move on to page 31. Our net position has increased at $104,233,972. The additional reports are listed in the standard format, and I don't have any further comment.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Are there any questions from the Finance Committee with regard to the financial report?
Chairman, I
Hearing
did
none.
want to report on the status
please.
of the audit. On the status of the
Yes, sir.
audit, our staff has been working through that. We do have draft financial statements ready, and that field work is progressing. So I would think we would have something potentially in May.
Thank you, Mr. Costin, for that information. Any additional questions for Mr. Costin on the financial report? Do we have a motion, please, to accept?
Steen moves.
Thank you, Mr. Seed. Is there a second, please?
Montplaisir, seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Montplaisir. Been moved and seconded to accept the financial report as presented by Mr. Costin. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thanks, Don. Our next order of business is the Executive Director's financial report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
before I dig into the details, I just want to make a notification for the Finance Committee. I did send out a link to our new financial dashboard to all the Finance Committee members and the board members. That link is a link that can be used over and over again. So if the committee members would want to bookmark that or save that in their browser, they can access that at any time. It is updated once a month by the PMC as we process invoices. It's a great resource and a great opportunity to provide all the information at the fingertips of the Finance Committee. We won't preview it here in my report, but it's the same data that is contained in my report. Certainly looking for comments from the Finance Committee as we move forward. If there's any maybe ease of use or any comments related to the dashboard, we can certainly make some changes if it makes sense. So feel free to reach out to me as you begin to use that, and certainly let me know if there's any comments or concerns that anyone on the Finance Committee has with that. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll just kind of dig into the Executive Director's financial report. Same numbers as were expressed earlier in the Finance Committee meeting. Actual expenditures to date for the program is $660 million. To date in forecast year 2021, we're at a total of $30.61 million as of 3/26/2021. As you can see on this page, again, as usual, a lion's share of our expenses are contained under lands and impacted property mitigation. That is the most active task at the moment. And then the other active tasks are the P3 procurement, and those costs are contained in the engineering, legal, financial, and P3 support. So digging into the level 2 detail, nothing much that's changed on this sheet, so we can maybe move on to the next. And here you can see the expenditures in the lands acquisition and mitigation, obviously our largest area. Appears to be on schedule, actually a little bit under. If you use the dashboard, we do have kind of a speedometer on there that shows where the anticipated expenditures to date should be. So we're actually running a little bit under budget in our lands acquisition and mitigation, as well as the other items. Not necessarily a concern at the moment. I think once we move through the procurement status here over the course of the next few months and move towards full-scale construction, we'll obviously have a lot of activity in all of the budget areas. So that's about all I have for my financial report, Mr. Chair, but certainly open to answer any questions related to any of the items contained in the report.
Finance Committee, do you have any questions of Joel for the his financial report?
Mr. Chair, just have a question, Joel, on your last slide. When you say management, legal, financial, procurement, you had 16 million listed for the 2021. We've used 20 million to date. Or should be at 1 million to date, 1.126. And I know there was some money that we're going to save and use for the settlement. Is that 16 million still solid, or is that going to be a cost savings for us?
That's I'll have to pull in Paul to help answer that question. Paul,
because it's kind of got management, legal, and financial, and procurement, so it could be like different ways. But I just was curious whether the new financial model, Paul, reflected the fact that with upstream settlement, I think we all felt that our legal fees would drop.
I got you, Mayor. Yeah, so Paul, I'm not sure, we haven't updated the 2021 budgets since that time. Did this contemplate the settlement agreement?
It did, as you can see here.
on this line is the actual settlement agreement, the 35 million. But underneath the lands, there is an increased cost. That 16 million is a estimate due to the eminent domain costs. And as part of our revising the budget and relooking at the budget again, we looked at the potential for eminent domain cases or number of parcels being having to utilize the eminent domain process. And so that number does reflect the legal costs and the management costs for an increase in eminent domain cases. If we are able to settle without eminent domain, then we would definitely see a decrease or a cost savings in this line item.
So maybe Rick Steen would know the answer to this since he's an accountant. So there's been some shifts in our budget a little bit, and then he always will ask, and I'd ask the same. In the end point, does that change us a bit up or down in millions? So there's some different things that have come in there. Does that change our financial model?
It's a great question, Mayor Mahoney. And I believe Rick Steen did ask a similar question a few committee meetings ago related to the settlement agreement. We did put together numbers that were somewhat contemplated for MOUs with different political subdivisions that are no longer necessary in relation to the settlement agreement. Basically, the 35 million was already somewhat budgeted into the program for certain MOUs and various items that would have otherwise been necessary had the settlement agreement not been put into place. So I guess the quick answer, Mayor Mahoney, is no, there isn't any budget increase and there isn't necessarily any budget savings. We've just retermed some of the line items in our budget to reflect where the dollars are actually being expended.
Thank you.
Any
Any additional questions on the financial report? All right. Mr. Chair, I can move into contracting actions if you wish.
Please, yes, please move into contracting actions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. This month we have 3 contracting actions for finance consideration. The first one is a contract for with Schmidt & Sons for work package 50E. This is a demolition work package for structures in the right-of-way. And that was bid out, and the low bid was Schmidt & Sons for $98,000. And Mr. Chair, I think maybe I'll do an explanation of each one of these and then take questions and then a vote if that sounds appropriate.
Sounds great. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. The second item for consideration is in-town levy change order. Basically, this is for the settlement agreement with the ICS case. This was presented to the Diversion Authority Board last month in executive session with a negotiated terms. It was accepted by ICS, and so the settlement agreement with the contractor is being run through. The contract is change order number 11, and the amount due to meet our settlement agreement will be the $284,991. And then the last task order is task order 1, amendment 18 for a budget increase to HMG. And this is related to their annual professional liability insurance, which through their MSA, their negotiated MSA, The Diversion Authority Board has agreed to cover the cost of HMG's insurance premium on an annual basis. So that is the number that was submitted for their insurance premium, $269,384. Certainly available for any questions related to each of these three. And if after questions, Mr. Chair, we could have a vote on those, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any questions on items 1, 2, or 3 on the board approval contract actions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Mr. Steen.
I would move to approve
All three? Mr.
all three
Steen?
contract actions, yes.
We have a motion to approve all three contract actions as presented by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second, please?
Jacobson,
Do we have a
second.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Been moved and second to approve the contract actions as presented by Mr. Paulson. John, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don.
All right, Mr. Chair, the next items are for the Finance Committee's information. These are Executive Director approved contracting actions. I'll go through the list and take any questions related to any of these. The first one was for potholing for Excel for a gas line in the upstream mitigation area. The second contracting action was Task Order 6, Amendment 15, really just closing out a land management task order and had a savings of $38,600. The next item also was a closeout of a task order for a budget savings of $20,000. The third task order with HMG was really just a time extension, zero cost budget amendment. The next task order was the removal of the public outreach program from the AE2S contract. So that was a net savings of $2.2 million. The next one was a new services agreement for consulting services for 1892. That work was done already completed under an advanced work directive. And so this agreement is really just to pay the invoice due to 1892. The next item is a contract amendment for executive management services for $132,000. And if we move to the next page. And then the last executive director contracting action was, I'm sorry, that's for Cass County Joint. So that's all the Diversion Authority had for this month. Can certainly take any questions related to any of those.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Questions of the Finance Committee?
Yeah, Chairman, this is Kent Costin. I had a question on the Executive Management Systems Task Order Amendment. I just wondered if Joel could explain that a little bit. When I read it, it talks about recruitment consulting service, and it also talks about leadership development. And I'm not sure I understand what 4D leadership development means, nor who the audience is that would receive that development. I'm assuming that's training. Joel, could you explain that a little bit? Because the fee seems really high.
That's correct, Mr. Costin. So we have been using executive management systems for hiring, leadership development, and coaching for our executive staff, as well as the potential for board work for our Diversion Authority board. And so this is an amendment to add to each of those tasks related to executive management systems. And so in those 3 areas, as far as hiring, development and coaching, and then board work would be contained within this task order.
Joel, could you explain the future part of that, though? There seems to be a point we're approving today, but there also seems to be a commitment for years beyond us as well. I thought I saw a commitment for 21 through 23 as well.
That's correct, Mayor Mahoney. So this would be a task order for the next 2 years for what would be anticipated. Obviously, time and materials here, and so as we kind of scope out the work that we're going to be doing with the board and the services that executive management and the diversion authority staff, along with the board, will be undertaking, that would be contained within this task order. We also have contemplated a number of potential new hires. We have the authority from the board to really have 2 additional hires for this year. We will be moving forward with those and using executive management services to assist in the hiring process. And then as we move into next year and assess our internal labor needs for the diversion authority, we will also be adding that to through this amendment if additional employees are necessary or identified. And of course, as the Finance Committee is aware, the board would need to approve any structural increase in numbers of employees for the diversion authority. And so that would be a discussion that we would be having towards the end of this year, moving into 2022, once we've kicked off construction and we have a better grasp of the relationship with the P3 and have more clarity on the tasks that would be appropriate for the diversion authority to undertake internally.
So just for the board members to understand, this is a gentleman you hired for 26.5 back or early on. I thought it was more for yourself. I see a little mission creep when this last year he's cost us $144,000, and I don't remember us discussing that, but we must have approved it at one time. And now we're doing an additional mission creep of $132,000, but yet I thought you've already defined your finance manager and your person that's going to be compliance. So what other positions is he going to help us figure out for $132,000?
Well, the 132,000 is really for 3 different areas. One, hiring of a potential project manager to work under our engineering director to assist in going through the process of hiring a CFO, a chief financial officer. And then the other areas would be the work with the board, as well as the work with the executive staff through coaching and leadership development.
Just a question for Shelley. When this gentleman has helped out with the city of Moorhead, are you having bills this high that you're paying out for leadership development in the council of Moorhead?
Mayor Mahoney, I don't have that information at my fingertips right now, so I would not be able to respond to that at this time, but I certainly can get back to you.
Well, I was just under the impression the county was doing some type of professional group that's going to help us in the salary structure. I thought that was one thing, but it's hard for me to, a leadership role, and Mel's very good. I'm not debating that, Joel, but the problem we have is in public spaces, you're basically paying for a consultant almost $276,000 to help in leadership. And sometimes in a public venue, that's a little difficult to sell to the community, so.
Mayor Mahoney, we certainly can suspend this task order and have a more thorough review of necessary scope related to it. And if there's some discomfort with the finance board on the services being provided to the DA staff.
I think the hard time, Joe, is we sometimes don't know what he's doing, so I didn't realize we spent 144,000 on him, and I know he's valuable to you, but sometimes the board doesn't see the product of the work he does, so I think that's sometimes what gives us a moment to pause. Kent, I think that's what your concern was, or no?
Well, yeah, I didn't understand the scope of work, and I do understand based upon the explanation it's multifaceted, but I would wonder how the financial budget is derived, because intuitively it just seems really high to me.
Well, okay. Well, we will take another look at that. Is there any proposed budget that seems more palatable for the scope that's been presented?
Before you go there, I think Chad Peterson has his hand up. I know Chair cannot see that.
Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have no problem taking a pause in this, Joel, to get a better explanation for the team. And I think that, I guess the main question I have, Joel, if we do pause this for what could very well be a month, is that critical?
Well,
I mean, are you following my question?
yeah, so we are using Mel on a fairly regular basis on a number of different fronts. And this would fund the work that he's doing currently, so it would suspend that until we can get a better handle on what would be more appropriate for the Finance Committee to consider.
Mr. Chair, follow up, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a thought here, Joel. I mean, I don't want to interrupt what you're doing, but instead of perhaps approving this for another 2 years, continue what you're doing. Bring back some additional information next meeting. And so, before we approve an extension of a 2-year extension on this, and then the Finance Committee can better weigh in on what's happening here. And that's just a thought.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. For the Finance Committee's information, Mr. Paulson and I vetted this earlier today on a phone call, and the same questions were addressed that all of you have a concern for. And but just so you know that there has been a lengthy discussion about the scope of work. So we have a suggestion that we remove the executive management, item number 7, from the executive director's approved contracts, and just approve the first 6. This is a non-actionable item. This is in Mr. Paulson's purview, but Joel, I'll leave that up to you as to how you execute it.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So these have already been executed, so we'll have to figure out a way to deal with that, but we will deal with that internally, and perhaps provide a report back to the board, to the Finance Committee in the next few months. So.
All right, thank you. Move on, please, to the Cass County Joint Water Resource Districts.
One item to report out here, Task Order 1, Amendment 4, Property Appraisal Services for Compass, an increase in budget of $70,600. And the next item would be the MCC JPA approved contracting actions. 2 items for Crown Appraisal, $11,500 and $13,500 for property appraisal services. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Just want to make a note, there were a number of additional items added to the Finance Committee today. We'll have John Shockley present those items. They're mainly agreements and MOUs. So.
Any additional questions on the Cass County or the Minnesota Clay County contract actions? Are there any discussion on those? Any questions of Joel? All right, we'll move on to item number 8. This is approval of MOUs and agreement actions, and this is Mr. Shockley's. Is Mr. Shockley on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had my microphone on mute and I was talking to myself. So, it's been, Mr. Chair, it's been another busy month of MOUs. We are making very good progress in getting all of the MOUs signed. And just a brief refresher, these are what we call third-party agreements, and these are agreements with different entities to undertake various parts of the project, and so they're critical path items to the project, and so getting them completed is very good. Overall, there's probably about 70 of these smaller third-party MOUs, and so every month you've been seeing a lot of these. And so I'm just going to run through an overview of each of the agreements. They're in your packet. I can give you a more specific review if you'd like. But with respect to the Cass County MOU, that is an MOU between Cass County and the Diversion Authority, whereby Cass County is going to take over the vacation process for roads as they are being dead-ended because of the Diversion Authority construction of the diversion channel. And so it provides for maintenance and permanent closures of those roadways. And it's one of those housekeeping items that we need to do as part of the project, because the project does cross over several county roads and township roads that need to be vacated, and maintenance of those roads over time is important. We then have an MOU with XL Energy, and that is another important MOU. That is for the rerouting of a pipeline underneath the diversion channel. We've worked very hard on that project, or that MOU, to get that completed. It's the coordination of placing the pipe, and that's just in general, that is slightly to the west of West Fargo. The pipe currently runs diagonal, and it is being rerouted to cross underneath the channel in a east-west fashion. The next is a MOU with New Star, and once again, that is for the diversion channel. That is another pipeline that is being rerouted, and as part of both of those pipelines, they have to bore them under the channel and use grouting and other materials to make sure that water doesn't penetrate from one side of the channel and flow into the protected area. The next set of agreements is with Cass Rural Water. Those are for some service line abandonments. There are some houses and buildings being removed along the diversion channel right of way to make way for construction of the diversion channel. And so those pipelines have to be capped and removed. And so that's about an $18,000 cost. And then we did have a late add and an agreement between Cass Water and the Diversion Authority as part of the construction of the southern embankment by the Corps of Engineers. Several utilities have to be relocated. One of those utilities is Cass Rural Water. And so they have several pipes that need to be relocated for ongoing construction, including construction around the diversion inlet, drain 27, SEA2, and the Red River control structure. And so all told, those are about $618,000 of relocations. The reason that we pushed this through so quickly is that apparently there is a gathering shortage of pipe in the industry. And so in order to secure a better price on the pipe, we needed to get it approved by the board at this meeting. Otherwise, the potential increases in the pipe could be significant. I've heard some increases of the pipe have been 180% or more, and so we're trying to avoid that, and that's why we rushed through getting this contract on the agenda. I can answer any of the questions that you might have about the agreements, but that's just a general overview. It's been another busy month.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley on these 5 items? All right, thank you. Moving on, the P3 schedule update, Mr. Shockley.
I don't know, Mr. Chair, did you need to make a recommendation on those agreements?
Yeah. Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
Mayor Mahoney moved to approve the MOUs we've talked about today that John Shockley just presented.
Steen seconds.
Thank you. Motion and second to approve the 5 agreement actions and MOUs that Mr. Shockley presented this afternoon. Don, would you please call the roll?
Theodorakis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Moving on to the P3 schedule update, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I'm going to just give a very, very quick update on WIFIA, then I will jump in on the schedule update. I do know that I've had some questions from board members about the interest rate volatility in the bond markets right now. Depending upon the week in which different obligations are sold, there's been fluctuations within the treasury rate. In discussing the concern and issue with WIFIA, they have agreed that we will insert a provision within the WIFIA agreement whereby at the time we make our first draw, so we're intending to close on the WIFIA loan on June 29th. If we're not intending to draw upon it until about 2023. So if during that time the interest rate drops on the treasuries, they will allow us to recalibrate that lower interest rate, but it can't ever go higher than what we lock in at the date of closing. So it's an advantageous clause for the diversion authority. With respect to the P3 schedule, the diversion authority did receive the technical proposals in March, and we are expecting to receive the financial proposals from the P3 teams on Friday. Going into May, we're going to be asking for a special board meeting on May 13th to approve the master indenture of trust and also to authorize Cass County Joint Water Resource District to issue its temporary refunding improvement bonds. And then we are going to be asking the board to kind of keep your schedule somewhat open the last week in May, as we may need to have a meeting scheduled for the selection of the preferred P3 proposer. We should have a better idea of what that schedule would look like in the next couple of weeks, and we'll try to get that out to the board as soon as possible. But we just wanted to make sure that everybody was kind of keeping their schedule a little bit more open the last week in May.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Is there any questions of John? All right, moving on. Property acquisition status report, Mr. Dodds.
Good afternoon, Mayor, committee members. In your packet is the usual monthly acquisition status report. I think you have all the information, mostly familiar to many of you. Paul, if you can just go to the next page quick, I'll point out a few items. Thank you. So on this page here, overall status map showing the status of where we are with acquisitions for the project. All the channel lands have been acquired. You see it, most of them highlighted in green. There are a few highlighted in red where we have an eminent domain action ongoing. In the last month, we've had a small handful of parcels that have been acquired.